So maybe you are asking yourself, what is Rocky Lab and what we are doing? The mission of Rocky Lab is to inspire, educate, and connect under-resourced entrepreneurs. We are using this space as a place where everybody can have access. If you want to start a business, or you're already in the business, and you want to scale your business, this will be a place for entrepreneurs. And all the service which you provide in this space, from workshop like this one, seminars, consultation, technical assistant TA, and even for those who are looking for access to capital, we'll have our partner, Forge, which is a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institutions, which they also provide access to capital. So this will be a place where you get all that information, all those assistants, mentors, for free, no charge. So what we are doing, which the library has done since the beginning, the libraries have democratized information and resources. You can go to any library, you see how equity looks like. You can go to a library and you see what access looks like. And Central Arkansas Library System is really extending this to entrepreneurship. We want to promote entrepreneurship. And I just want to say that the idea of Rocket Lab, it was not just because of what happened in May 25th because of George Floyd. It was not, it didn't happen because of COVID-19. We had this idea last year. And I have to commend the leadership of Central Arkansas Library System and Nate, who I see is here join us. They saw that it's very important for the library to continue to be part of the community in terms of building more equitable, more just economic system. They understand that in order for us, for all the community to move forward, we need to serve and support under-resourced and underserved entrepreneurs. And that's why this library, this center, Rocket Lab, is more than just a space for entrepreneurs. It's part of transforming lives. It's part of building economic mobility. It's part of building what we call a better community for all of us. So this is our first event, but we'll have more events in the future. But without further ado, I really want to bring the Executive Director of Central Arkansas Library System, Nate, who are with his team. They have been so supportive, and they are the one really, put together this. We are partner, but they have done a lot. But his vision of understanding that we need to build and support, to build more equitable and just society and support those entrepreneurs. And especially during this time of COVID-19, this space was supposed to, we are thinking about maybe open the beginning of the year. But together we say, no, this is the time where under-resourced, underserved entrepreneurs, they need more support. Most of them, they are surviving. Some of them, they are closing their business. We want to be part of the solution. We want to be the one who help them to survive, to pivot their business model, and to thrive during this crisis and after the crisis. Because we don't believe this is the new normal. This is the new reality, but we'll change this new reality for the benefit of the society. We'll overcome this crisis, and when we rise better community together, and build a better society. So without further ado, Nate, can you say something? Can you share something with the participants?
Sure. What I mostly want to say is thank you, Benito, and Thank you to Pat Riley and others who've worked hard to get this started. When we started talking about this a year and a half ago, we didn't envision that the pandemic was going to strike, but I think you're right that this is all the more important and a bigger priority now than it was when we started talking about it 18 months ago. But it occurred to me that what happens in a lot of people's households is that they're working and they are struggling to make ends meet, particularly households of people who have fewer resources. They don't have a network of friends around to help them further a good idea. And they might have a great idea, and it would add some additional money to their household income if they could figure out how to get started with developing their business. And when I heard about Benito and the work he'd been doing with Remix Ideas, I thought, well, the library's got space and we have credibility. We've been in the business for over 100 years at this location in Little Rock, downtown Little Rock, and libraries in the United States for 150 or 60 years, doing the kind of work where people are trying to get some resource that will help them elevate and help them get to a better place, either by learning a skill, finding some resource, some answer to a question that they don't have. And it's just obvious that a lot of people don't have mentors. They don't have a group of friends to encourage them, to tell them you might need to talk to somebody at the Secretary of State's office about filing your papers. You might get some help from an accountant. You might find something online. All those kinds of things I think Benito can bring together with what we've already been trying to do at the downtown library, at Williams Library, and some other places in a less organized way, but in a very important way for people who are looking to improve their life, to make their households a little bit more prosperous, and to create some generational wealth, multi-generational wealth. I know Benito has a goal that through all of this effort, if we could create a couple of hundred jobs over several years, that would be great. But it would just also be a wonderful thing if it improves people's hope and their outlook, and they believe that their children's paths might be easier than their own path. And it'll also, I think, in so many ways, help our economy, the macro economy here in the community. I'll quit on this point. There's a couple of years ago, there was a library meeting, I think in Baltimore, and they had someone there from the Ewing Kauffman Foundation who made the point that by perhaps 2040 or 2050, half of the people in the workforce will not be getting a W-2. They'll be working for themselves, in other words. That's a pretty stunning thing. It's hard for me to get my mind around that, to think that there won't still be large Amazons or Walmarts out there where people are employees of some large organization. But if half the payroll, half of the people working in the labor force are working for themselves or a very small business where they're a partner in that business, it'll be a great thing. So without any further laboring, let's listen to Edward. I appreciate the work he does. I've been on a couple of Zoom calls where Edward was the hit, both the Rotary call and Downtown Little Rock Partnership board meeting. So I know that he has some great information, and I hope it'll help. And if the library can help any of you, Benito knows where to find me. He'll give you my phone number, my email, and we're here to help. We want to help you find whatever information you need to get your business started or improve your capacity for delivering more household income and more products, services to the community. So thank all of you for participating.
Thank you very much, Nate. So really, without further ado, I don't need to say much, because one of the challenges we are facing right now in the COVID-19 small business like ours is really access to capital. Before even COVID-19, small business, they were still at barriers of access to capital, which is the blood of any business. So today we have somebody who has resources, has money, and that's very important. That's why we're here. So Edward is Executive Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration, Arkansas District. And Edward has been supportive of small businesses. And I have to say, supportive of underserved and under-resourced entrepreneurs. Every time when I call Edward, he picked my call, He answers my emails right away, even during this time of COVID-19. So Edward, even we hear that small business, they don't do, in other places, they don't do very well, they don't return calls, but Edward has been excellent and is really the person, everybody we need to know. And if you need any assistant at Small Business Administration, please contact Edward. So Edward, today you talk about the most important thing, economic injury disaster loans, which are really, everybody wants to hear from you. How can they get that money? So I will not take much time. I'm giving you this platform so you can tell them that everybody here can be able to get that money.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Benito. Nate, thank you, and your team, Tamika there, for hosting this. Remix Ideas has been a fantastic economic engine for our underserved community, and you both hit the nail on the head. We've got a lot of work to do, and entrepreneurship is one of those, probably the best vessel to create wealth in communities, especially underserved communities. That W-2 job is going to be a thing of the past in the near future. Nate, you touched on that. You're precisely right. I think when it comes to generating and gaining wealth in individuals, we've got to look at building something of your own in order to seriously profit and prosper from that. There's a balance there, and my role at the SBA is to make sure that underserved entrepreneurs and our small businesses across have unparalleled access to SBA resources. So I am going to cover a few things today, and obviously the hit or the highlight is going to be the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is one funding program SBA has. But let me touch on a couple numbers real quick. 19,680 loans have been processed here in Arkansas under the Economic Injury Disaster Lending Program. That totals over $950 million to Arkansas small businesses. That is a great start. The program has authorization to continue to run, and throughout this presentation, I'll talk about authorizations quite a bit, because we have to have an authorization of budget and funding in place in order to run a lot of our programs. Of course, every one of our lending programs is based on the authorization Congress gives us. So most of you have heard about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, as one of those legs on the stool SBA created and supported in order to help businesses get through these challenges. But the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is SBA's one of our core programs that we've used throughout history in order to support small businesses. Most of you don't know, or probably don't know, that SBA was created back in 1953 to help businesses compete at the heels of the Great Depression. With that came some support mechanisms that we had to ensure our business community could have every resource to be competitive and resilient during economic and natural disasters. So shaping that, our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is part of our disaster lending portal. That's where we look at how do we bring communities back from natural disaster events. So I'm telling you this story to give you a little bit of background where we started for COVID-19. And when that COVID hit, disaster declarations were actually physical declarations that the SBA relied on in order to authorize use of this program. In early February, or excuse me, late February, when we got the initial sign of economic impact in Arkansas, we started polling small businesses. Through the normal process, we have to wait for the governor in order to create a request from the state of Arkansas in order to request relief from SBA and authorization for these loans. So that came in fairly quick. We were actually the third state in the United States to get this authorization and go start processing SBA disaster loans. With that being said, the scope that we had to react to at the SBA normally is obviously thrown out the window for COVID, right? When we look at the natural disaster response team, we had something that was more in tune to maybe 100,000 to 200,000 applications in a month-long period. You know, superstorms like Sandy, Irma, Harvey, those were the disasters SBA was used to reacting to. Well, when I talk about numbers, imagine a superstorm Sandy, Irma, and Harvey happening in every state in the country. Those are the types of numbers now SBA has to process, and we're talking 100,000 applications in a day as opposed to a month. So I want to kind of frame that as we go and talk a little bit more about our program here, the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop here and give you all some PowerPoints as a reference. One thing I do want to point your attention to, and we'll make sure everyone gets copies of these slides sent out through the library system. Our Gov Delivery, the hyperlink on the bottom is the updates. The best way for you to keep updated with us under these disaster relief times is through that Gov Delivery system. We send out updates on that on a reoccurring basis in order to keep everybody up to date on the same page. So with that being said, as most of you know, if SBA has to react to a disaster of this magnitude, we're going to have to scale and we're going to have to act like a business and get used to things changing on a continuous basis. And that's what we've done since this program started. You can head out to sba.gov funding programs. If you go out to sba.gov, you'll see the big COVID-19 banner where you can get access to this information, as well as direct to the application resource that's online with SBA's homepage there on COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loans. So I want to make sure you all have these links and contacts, and you can always go to sba.gov and follow the COVID-19 funding relief options in order to get right to these programs as well. So as I said, COVID-19 and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is a component of the relief efforts SBA made in order to support small businesses, nonprofits, and similar entities during COVID-19. We talked a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program that has exhausted its authorized funding and is no longer accepting applications. So that Paycheck Protection Program, in essence, is shut down until Congress decides if any new or additional changes need to be made to that program. So that leaves the other two legs on our stool, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which we're going to talk about today. And then also we have a debt relief program, which I'll cover in generalities so you all have an understanding about that. What the debt relief program does is it really takes any existing SBA loan and covers principal and interest payments for 6 months on those 7A, 504, and microloans. For our disaster loans that are out there in existence, let's say you had a disaster loan from the flooding we had earlier in 2019, that is going to be put on pause for 12 months, and you will not have to make principal or interest payments on those loans for up to 12 months under this debt relief program that was authorized under the CARES Act through Congress. But as Benito says, let's get to the money. Where's the money? That's what we're all here for, right? So traditionally, SBA is a guarantor of loans. That means SBA does not do the loan directly. Most of the time, we talk to borrowers about going and speaking with their lender, and we act as a guarantor of those funds. However, with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, since it is an SBA program, that's when we do direct lending, direct to the borrower through SBA's online system. Just cover a couple high-level topics about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and we use this quite frequently in order to compare the two loan programs, since we have had many borrowers looking at what's better for me and what's better for my business. So we do a side-by-side comparison of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan programs with the Paycheck Protection Loan programs to give folks a little bit of an idea on how this might impact their business. Now, as we said, there's three legs to the stool. Paycheck Protection Program was created in order to really keep individuals employed in small businesses. This gave businesses access to payroll relief funds so they could keep their employees coming back to their business and keep their doors open during COVID. This program has forgivable funds, which would turn into a grant if you use them for the eligible components. Our Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, you'll see on the right side of your screen here, is really long-term working capital funding in order to help a business pay for those other expenses that it could not pay for due to loss in revenue. Your business was trucking along. Let's say you were making $100,000 a year. All of a sudden, COVID hit. Most numbers drop by 50% or greater. You don't have the available cash or capital to pay your overhead expenses at that point. That's where the economic injury disaster loan comes in. We'll talk a little bit about the functions of it, what it's used for, what it can't be used for, and who's eligible for that in the upcoming slides. But to give you a quick high level, we've got a $150,000 loan that is not forgivable. This is not going to be turned into a grant, and it is not eligible for forgiveness. So the economic injury disaster loan is a direct loan from SBA. Based on, you have to certify as a borrower that your business or your entity was negatively impacted by COVID. These loans for small businesses are at 3.75% and for nonprofits at 2.75%, repayable over a 30-year period. So there we go. We have up to $150,000 repayable over a 30-year period and no payments for the flexibility when it comes to long-term capital and COVID-19. The PPP program was made for immediate relief. However, the COVID economic injury disaster loan authorization puts us all the way out and gives us a lot longer tail for reconstitution and helping support those businesses over a longer time. So with this being a disaster loan program, 3,000 operators answering calls on a daily basis to help businesses process and go through their EIDL applications. This information, again, is available on our website, and it also be referenced several times in the slide. Overview of the economic injury disaster loan program. This is a Treasury authorized process for applications, approvals, va.gov, and it's free to apply. It's a really simple application process. There's just a couple screens there that you'll need to fill in with quite a few self-certifications where you have to certify as the business or applicant owner that your business was negatively impacted, and this is a required loan for you to sustain or continue operations. No payments for 12 months. We talked about that. Interest will still accrue. You're not required to accept the loan. That's the great part. So you can apply and get approved for a loan, and you're not required to take the loan. So this establishes some liquidity for those businesses and gives them access to capital without necessarily requiring them to take the loan. And for most of you, you've heard about the EIDL advance, which was authorized initially under the CARES Act and the relief funding for this economic injury disaster declaration. However, the advance funds have been used to their entirety, and we do not have current authorization for those EIDL advance. So we're no longer processing advances for the economic injury disaster loan. The SBA set the max loan amount for EIDL loans at $150,000 to help maintain and get access to as many businesses and borrowers as possible. So normally this is up to a $2 million program, but due to the changes and the overwhelming subscription from COVID, SBA dropped that maximum loan amount to $150,000. Even if you have an SBA disaster loan, that does not preclude you from applying for this from this one. What is great about the EIDL loan program as well is once you establish your application, and let's say you're approved or declined, you have some options to either request reconsideration or also request loan increases on your economic injury disaster loan if you do successfully get the loan. So we'll talk a little bit about that moving forward. Everybody wants to know, what can I use the money for? What can these funds be used for? These funds are used for any eligible business purpose that helps sustain your business during the downturn in COVID-19. This is not a refinance loan. So if you have, let's say, farm equipment, or you have some other type of machinery equipment that's factored or leased at a higher rate, this is not your option to refinance those assets at a lower fixed term. That's not an eligible use of proceeds. So what we consider proceeds are the funds that you get from this economic injury disaster loan. You're eligible to pay the rent on the building or storage units or any rent that you have associated with your business or entity, mortgage payments on the business premises, and ongoing capital needs, let's say fixed utility bills, payroll, if you have accounts payable for inventory, those funds can all be eligibly applied to those resources for the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Let's say you had some outstanding inventory bills that you haven't been able to pay because you don't have the revenue coming in. That's a perfect example of what economic injury disaster funds are available for. Even more so, what they cannot be used for, this is going to keep you out of trouble. It's not for paying dividends and bonuses to the individual stockholders, owners, or employees. However, there are some few exceptions where that can. They're not for expansion of your facilities. So this is not a, hey, I need to grow or start a new business loan. This is an economic injury. My business has sustained injury from COVID, and now I need money to help me get to the next point and reconstitute. It's not for paying down any kind of regular installment debt that you normally have that's not associated with the business. And it's not for use for payment for any other federal debt, including SBA loans or student loans or home loans. So who's eligible? Are small businesses, of course, eligible. Sole proprietors are eligible under this. That means those individual independent contractors and sole proprietor businesses are eligible to apply for this. Cooperatives, really any business with less than 500 employees. SBA and Congress expanded eligibility under this program to include private nonprofit organizations, veteran organizations, religious affiliated organizations, and all agricultural organizations. So pretty much everyone is going to be eligible as long as you're not running in certain industries that would be specifically lobbying or businesses of a prurient sexual nature or any of those type entities or establishments that would preclude open or memberships to the public. So the primary requirements for approval is credit scoring. Now, what happens with the application? It's a very simple application form. Not a ton of information is collected. So you go in, you fill out about 3 pages of information on the online portal, and you hit submit. SBA automatically pulls the credit score of the individual applicant, and looking at that is the first pass that SBA takes to approve or decline the loan. Now, there is not a set credit score SBA is looking at. It takes an internal model that SBA developed in order to look at both Dun and Bradstreet information as well as personal credit information and third-party certified information in order to build an internal credit score for approval. And then, of course, proven ability to repay the loan. SBA is going to look for that under the first sweep. Those folks who cannot apply are ineligible. Again, if you're engaged in illegal activity, that's a no-go. A principal with 50% more than 60 days delinquent on child support. So that's any owner. If the owner owns 50% or more of the business, if they're 60 days or more delinquent on child support, they're going to be ineligible. Borrowers display material of a prurient sexual nature. So, you know, we're not into, let's say, those dance clubs for the gentlemen's or those that serve or resell novelties and toys. More of 1/3 gross annual revenue from legal gambling activities. So we have to look at that. And if you do have a gambling establishment, we're looking at not exceeding 1/3 of those gross annual revenues. And that really impacts a lot of our gas stations that have lottery sales there. But if you have a specific question on that, you can always call my office to address. Of course, we said lobbying and government entities. I told you a little bit about the advance program. The advance is now closed. Those program authorizations have been expanded. So we no longer have access to the EIDL advance. Now, pending any future changes, if Congress opens that program back up and reauthorizes funding, we may see additional funding come out with that economic injury disaster loan advance. So to talk a little bit about the process, because a lot of folks have been unsure what that process looks like, you go out to the SBA portal, disasterloan.sba.gov, and you fill in the simplified application form, and make sure you keep that confirmation number, because that confirmation number is what we're going to refer to throughout the entire loan process until your loan has been approved. If approved for an economic injury disaster loan advance, we said that's not happening. But what was happening is funds were showing up in folks' account without any kind of communication. However, now, if you are approved for the economic injury disaster loan, you will receive an email from SBA with some specific instructions on creating a customer account in their portal. If you are denied, SBA will notify you of the reason, and you can request reconsideration within 6 months. So a lot of the initial declines are due to lack of information. And what helps is the borrower getting together some additional documentation and sharing that with the SBA loan portal in order to help get over the declinations. But we have an email address here. So if you have been through this process and you did get a decline, you can always request a reconsideration from SBA by providing them some additional information so you can help get over and find out the reason why you were declined. Of course, if you need additional information after an approval, you can always apply for an increase in your economic injury disaster loan. If less funds are needed, you can apply for a decrease. So it's flexible. SBA is really here to help you establish that credit facility to help you get through reconstitution. So what we do suggest is if you do have an eligible entity and you have been impacted by COVID, you get your application in and get the process started, because it is on a first come, first served basis. And SBA is processing about 20,000 applications a day in order to get these things put through the system. So of course, I'm sure you all have questions. I'm not going to be able to answer all your questions here, although I'm going to really try. But we do have the 1-800 number, 1-800-659-2955 is the direct line into our customer service line at SBA Office of Disaster Assistance, or you can always email the disaster customer service at sba.gov. Through this process, most of you aren't, you're not familiar with the economic injury disaster loan process, nor a lot of folks are familiar with filling out SBA forms. So we do offer some assistance from SBA funded resource partners that you can go to and get one-on-one assistance to help fill out your application, explain or help address any other inconsistencies SBA found in your application, and help you overcome any declinations so you can get a yes on this economic injury disaster loan program. We have a tool available at sba.gov/local assistance, where you can type in your zip code. You can find the local resource partner closest to you and connect with them online or over the phone in order to get assistance, as most of our resource partners are working virtually at this time. I've also included additional contact information here for all our team across the state of Arkansas. As I said, I will make sure that Tamika gets this slide deck so we can get this out to our respondents here. And I'll leave this up, and you can always follow us at SBA_Arkansas on Twitter in order to get the most recent updates as those come live. So I know I've covered a lot in a short amount of time, but I wanted to get through a lot of the granular stuff so we could have a better discussion and answer any questions you all have about economic injury or any of SBA's other services that I can talk about. So Benito, I'll turn it back over to you for some Q&A.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edward, and thank you. That was a great information. So Tamika, we ask everybody to type your question on the chat room, and Tamika, she'll read those questions. So I'll turn back to Tamika.
So we got one. What is the turnaround on the application process?
Great. So what we've been told is 3 to 4 weeks on turnaround for applications. It really depending upon when you applied. Now, let me go ahead and give you a little bit more color around that answer, because I know those folks that applied early on in the process may have applied either under a paper-based form or the original application when it was launched under SBA's original system. Since then, SBA, of course, had to react to the overwhelming demand and put a new IT system in place in order to process these with using fintech financial technology systems. So if you have not heard about your loan program or your loan application, you can go ahead and send disaster customer service at sba.gov a request for an update with your submission number. You need to have that submission number. If you're unable and have not gotten any additional information from them, you can always email me directly. And I'll give you an email address here in the chat block that everyone can email their request to. And send us a request to get an update. I'm also reading the chat block. I never got anything back when SBA originally applied. The application process was very user-friendly the second time around. So if those, let's say you've put in more than one application, which happened for many borrowers during this time, what they do is they link those applications up on the back end. So if you did not get an initial response, please make sure you go in and reapply in the streamlined application process. There was a time when most borrowers were putting in their application and were receiving a confirmation back with the number 2, or it started with a 22. Those applicants were required to go back in and resubmit under the new streamlined application method. So those updates went out of our office, but if you hadn't gotten back in there, please either reach out to me directly or reach out to my team, and we can get you sorted out with wherever you're at in the process. From Dom, can you say more about accounts payable? Are the only justifiable expense from pre-pandemic? No, if you had any commitments pre-pandemic that you were required to pay on, those are all going to be eligible expenses, as long as you can justify them in the normal course of business operation and you don't go into any new commitments post-COVID for expansion or growth options. Those are going to be your accounts payable that are eligible under the economic injury disaster loan. So if you had utility payments, if you had leases, anything like that, if you're paying a fixed asset, the interest portion on that is going to be eligible. Those are eligibles for account payable on the economic injury disaster loan. Johnny gave me an update, said they couldn't find the first one. I understand. I know there has been a lot of information, and SBA was really running quicker than it had ever intended to in the beginning of the economic injury disaster program. So I know a lot of those early adopters had a frustrating start with the economic injury disaster program. But since they've implemented the new system with the streamlined application process, things really streamlined and got a bit more simple for SBA. I can tell you, it's not the easiest process to go through. We are still the federal government. So I'm just buyer beware on that. Plan to spend a little bit more time and trying to get a hold of folks there. I know it can be frustrating, but you have to understand the size and scope of the disaster that we're dealing with. SBA is normally about 5,000 employees across the country, and only about 1,500 of those work in our disaster team. So with that, we've really had to scale up the size and scope of what SBA has responded to over the past 6 months here. So we do appreciate your patience in that. I know my team really is taking hundreds of calls a day in order to talk to individual borrowers across Arkansas to make sure they do get resolution when they're unable to get that through the disaster customer service team. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Did you want to open up the phones for any voice questions or?
Yes, I think we can open. If there's anybody has a question, please go ahead and ask.
We also got a question on Facebook. Someone said that they got an unexplained deposit, and then we heard nothing else. Should they file a new application?
So if they got if they've got an unexplained deposit, assuming it came from SBA Treasury, there should be that should be a number that correlated to their economic injury request. I'm assuming that's what this is from. What happened when we had the economic injury disaster advance program, any applicant that selected they wanted the advance also put in the number of employees they had. Then that unexpected deposit into their account really would have been the advance amount, and it should have been based on the number of employees they reported. If it was 10, they would have gotten $10,000. If it was 3, they would have gotten $3,000. That lets you know the system is working. What they can do is reach out to SBA at the Disaster Assistance Hotline or that email address with their confirmation number and request a status update. If they're not able to get that, they can go ahead and get a hold of me and we can help track that down. Question, is there any special consideration for disabled veterans? No, there is no additional special consideration. This program is really, since it's driven by SBA, it's really there to help meet the intent of everyone. You know, if you have a business or entity that's eligible that has suffered COVID impacts, you should be eligible there. Now, if you do get a screen out, let's say because there may be some credit challenges there, that's where we can request a reconsideration and look beyond the credit score to the totality of the borrower to try to get an application approved in that sense. Some great questions coming in though. How about on the phone, any other questions?
You can unmute yourself if you do have a question that you would like to ask.
Well, as we're waiting and seeing if we have any other questions come in, I'd just like to take another minute and really kind of talk about for those out there that are maybe taking this opportunity to reset or restructure their business or maybe even launch something new. SBA's loan programs are still available. Really, the 7A is SBA's flagship program that you have to go to a lender in order to get. These SBA loan funds do qualify up until September 27th under COVID relief funding. So that means if you were to get an SBA 7A 504 or microloan by September 27th of this year, SBA will pay the first 6 months of principal and interest on that loan. And that will also piggyback with a 6-month deferment on payments. So if you're starting a new business or expanding in an existing business, you have the ability to go seek SBA 7A microloan and 504 funding and really have up to a year where you're not paying any debt on that payment. So that's a great option for our new startup businesses or existing businesses looking for expansion. Maybe COVID turned out to be more of an opportunity for you than not. I think that program is available across our lenders throughout the nation. Now, what we have done in order to really engage and bring more lending options here in Arkansas is we use a program called Lender Match, which is a national SBA program that can connect borrowers in anywhere in the country with SBA lenders. So it really helps us tap into lenders outside of the local area that may be more adept and maybe a little bit more risk tolerant than what we see in most traditional lenders here in Arkansas. That helps our borrowers tap into that market and look at as many options as they can in order to seek funding and get approved for funding. So SBA 7A microloan and 504 options, and you can go to sba.gov/lender-match and find those options. It's pretty much type in your business info, what you're looking for, hit submit, and within 48 hours, you'll have a list of lenders coming back to you to see if they opt into your deal and can get more information from you. So it's a great way to interact with SBA legitimate lenders and get off the internet from some of the fraudulent lenders that are out there, because we know that's a significant area that we're trying to address. Aaron writes, is there any way to check in the status or follow up on a reconsideration? Patience, Aaron, on that one, I would say. The biggest thing now that SBA has processed a lot of the first pass on these applications is the reconsideration process. Just make sure when you are putting in a reconsideration that you submit all the required material. Other than that, patience is a virtue at this time. I know our team up there is overwhelmed with the number of applications they're going through. If it seems to get beyond, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks, then you definitely need to get a hold of somebody. And if they're not responsive at the disaster customer service, get a hold of my team and we can help direct you and elevate that through the system. If you owe past taxes, can you receive a loan? So if you are delinquent on federal debt, you're not going to be eligible for a loan. That federal debt, we look at that across the board to see if you're pending any of that. So no, you would not be eligible if you have past taxes in collections. Now, if it's not noted and it doesn't flag, then yes, you will. You would be authorized. But however, if you know you owe past taxes or delinquent in federal debt, then no, you're ineligible. And that's where a lot of our self-certification process came in this time around. As you go through the economic injury disaster loan program, you'll notice you have to click a lot of certifying boxes. And those certifying boxes really use your statements as eligibility certification. So if you know you're ineligible due to delinquent taxes, then I would go ahead and opt out of applying for that. I have one that I think we missed here from Dom. Do you have any recommendations for maintaining records in case of audits? Absolutely. So SBA suggests that you keep records for up to 5 years beyond the disbursement of or expense of funds. So with that, really my recommendation is to open a completely clean, separate account for any of these funds that you would be getting from SBA, and really using that account to maintain records of transactions with these funds. That way you don't commingle it with other expenses that you may have, and you can clearly show the expense trail that you have from SBA, either EIDL funds or in that case, PPP funds as well. So separate bank account, and of course, keep good records. Anything on a cloud service that gets backed up is really going to be what you want to look at. I think we know through our physical disaster side, a lot of the physical disaster information that we tend to keep and think of, I've got the receipt in the box, I've got my files here. Well, those things get impacted rather quickly in physical disasters. So we like to think, have something on the cloud, keep your files backed up on the cloud, and make sure you're routinely backing those up in case of any audits or future challenges you have in that. And of course, make sure you have your team set up, your bail team, your banker, your accountant, your attorney, your insurance agent. And so I think when we look at that, your CPA is an essential part of that team to make sure you're using their best practices in order to manage and maintain documentation. Not only your EIDL relief funds or EIDL funds of any other funds you also have. Absolutely, Dom. Thank you. And I think right now there is some legislation, and IRS is really working on the intent of the dual expense basis for these funding programs, especially with PPP on the forgiveness component. So for those of you that might have already applied for the economic injury disaster loans and received the advance, that advance is not required to be paid back. Since that was a true advance, it's going to turn into a grant for you, as long as you did not get the PPP as well. So you can get both of them, but unfortunately, as federal government dollars don't like being commingled with each other, you cannot get EIDL for advance and PPP forgiveness on both of those loan programs. So it looks like we've got all the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe can you talk about the gig economy for those people in the gig economy?
Sure, absolutely. I think the gig economy really it was brought to light during the CARES Act legislation. And I think when we look at what eligibility is, obviously those businesses that are eligible, that are in the gig economy, the Uber drivers, the Uber Eats folks, the Fast Eats, all those folks are eligible as independent contractors to apply for this. The one caveat that we do make is this will affect your ability to get unemployment insurance, because that was also opened up for those independent contractors and individual self-employed individuals during COVID-19. So if I were an independent contractor, I'd be looking at really what program is going to be the best benefit, the best bang for the buck. You may find that as an independent contractor, you don't have really the impact under the COVID-19 EIDL threshold, and self-employment or unemployment insurance for that may be your option. I would definitely check in with your local unemployment office, since that's handled at the state level. We don't really get into unemployment benefits. However, the state can really help direct you to that best resource. If it is, and you do decide that economic injury disaster loan program is better for you, then obviously apply away. You are eligible under this program and under PPP.
Thank you very much, Edward. Anybody has a question? You can mute yourself. We have about 5 minutes. This is the time to understand this program, so you can be able to.
Yeah, Sierra types in, I received a letter stating that we are approved for a grant and was not eligible for a loan amount, but I have yet to receive the amount that was stated for the grant. Go ahead and submit your submission number up to SBA. The timing has a lot to do with that when the advance authorizations were sunset. So depending upon if your loan was actually put through the queue, I think that's a great way to make sure that you, if you are eligible, those proceeds are dispersed. However, I can tell you, I know we got a lot of folks that had applied and had not received those because those funds were cut out. So depending upon where that's at, only the Office of Disaster Assistance can really answer that, Sierra.
Great. I think this has been a wonderful event. And Edward, thank you very much for giving this information, which is very important for small businesses, especially at this time. And we want to thank everybody, all the participants. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the first event for Rocket Lab. So I'm here, this is the space, this Rocket Lab will open officially, and we invite everybody to come and see this space, and we'll have mentors, we'll have workshops, and for now we'll continue to do this kind of event using Zoom, but soon, it's gonna come soon, like Edward said, we need to be optimistic. We'll change. This will not be the new normal. We'll have new reality, and I hope everybody will be able to survive in their business and thrive, and so that we can build more just and equitable economic system. So on behalf of Rocky Drab, I want to say thank you everybody for participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Hey, Tamika, are you still on?
Yeah.
I know we had a question here. I just wanted to make sure if the webinar will be accessible afterwards.
Yeah, that person sent I was not sure if that one just came to me, but yes. We'll pull the recording and see about loading it to our Facebook page or to our YouTube page.
Okay. Is there anything I can answer from the Facebook chat that we didn't get to?
Well, there were some questions that were dealing with workers. I know you mentioned the
Unemployment insurance.
hold on, let me get back to it.